I was sitting at my kitchen table, watching the morning sun paint golden squares across the floor, when my daughter said the words that made my heart stop. "Mom, we've been living here over a decade. Don't you think it's time you put our names on the deed?" If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as unbelievable as this one, and you don't want to miss it. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her, but Karen stood across from me, arms folded across her chest, chin tilted up like she was negotiating a business deal, not talking to the mother who'd given her everything. Michael, my son-in-law, sat beside her, scrolling through his phone as if this conversation didn't concern him at all, as if my answer was already decided. "My name is Kristen Jackson. I'm 67 years old. I taught high school English for 35 years, and until that moment, I thought I knew my daughter. 13 years earlier, they'd stood in this same kitchen, desperate and apologetic. Michael had just lost his job. Karen was 4 months pregnant and terrified. They had nowhere to go, mounting debt and pride that was quickly crumbling under the weight of reality. "Just 6 months, Mom," Karen had promised, her eyes red from crying. "Just until Michael finds something steady. We'll follow whatever rules you need. We won't be a burden, I promise." I had lost my husband David only 2 years before that. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that echoed in empty rooms. When Karen asked for help, I didn't hesitate. I told myself I was doing what David would have wanted, supporting our only child when she needed us most. We sat at this very table and went over everything. They'd contribute to utilities and groceries. No pets, my allergies couldn't handle it. They'd keep the guest room tidy and respect my privacy. Michael would help with yard work. Karen would assist with household chores. We even created a budget together, mapped out their path back to independence. I gave up my sewing room so they'd have space. I rearranged my entire routine so they'd feel at home. "Thank you, Mom," Karen had whispered, hugging me tight. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Now, 13 years later, she stood before me with her hand out, demanding ownership of the house I'd worked 40 years to pay for. I set my coffee cup down carefully, watching the steam curl up and disappear. Karen was still waiting for my answer, her expression somewhere between impatient and entitled. Michael finally glanced up from his phone, eyebrows raised like I was taking too long to respond to something obvious. "Put your names on the deed," I repeated slowly, making sure I'd heard correctly. "Well, yeah," Karen shrugged, as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. "We've been paying the mortgage, Mom. We're basically co-owners already. It only makes sense to make it official." I almost laughed. Almost. But something cold and sharp had settled in my chest, and laughter felt impossible. "You've been paying the mortgage?" I asked quietly. Michael jumped in, still not looking at me. "We've been contributing. You know we have. And honestly, Mrs. Jackson, there are tax benefits we could all take advantage of if the paperwork reflected reality." Reality. That word hung in the air between us like smoke. The reality was that my living room, visible through the doorway behind them, looked like a daycare center had collided with a kennel. 2 children's toys covered every surface: plastic dinosaurs, Lego pieces, sticky tablets, and abandoned juice boxes. 3 dogs, despite my very first rule, sprawled across my late husband's favorite couch, shedding golden retriever hair onto the navy fabric I used to vacuum religiously. The reality was that the walls Karen had asked to just touch up were now painted in colors I never would have chosen. The hardwood floors David and I had refinished ourselves bore scratches from dog claws and scuff marks from riding toys. The reality was that my once peaceful home now thundered with noise from morning until night: children screaming, dogs barking, Karen and Michael's arguments echoing through walls that used to know only quiet conversations and classical music. But most of all, the reality was the stack of bills in my desk drawer upstairs. $11,000 in unpaid utilities, internet, and household expenses that Karen promised she'd get to next month for the past 2 years. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and tried to find the little girl who used to bake cookies with me in this kitchen. The one who'd bring me dandelions from the yard and call them sunshine flowers. The teenager who'd sobbed in my arms after her first heartbreak. swearing she'd never trust anyone again until I reminded her that walls keep out love just as much as pain. That girl was gone. Or maybe she'd just been buried under years of my own enabling. "When was the last time you paid the mortgage, Karen?" I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor trying to work its way up from my stomach. She blinked, and I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. "We've been handling it. You don't need to worry about those details." Details. I folded my hands on the table, the same way I used to when a student was trying to talk their way out of a failing grade. "The details are that you've missed 4 payments in the last 6 months. The details are that I've been covering them to protect my credit. The details are that this house has been in my name for 40 years, and you've lived here for 13 without ever once making a full mortgage payment." Michael's phone finally went down. His jaw tightened. "That's not fair. We've had expenses. The kids need things. We've been contributing in other ways." "What ways?" The question came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't take it back. Silence filled the kitchen. Outside, a neighbor's wind chime sang in the breeze, a sound I used to love, but now barely noticed under the constant noise of this household. Karen's expression shifted from confident to defensive. "Mom, we've been raising our family here. We've made this house a home. You're not alone anymore because of us. Isn't that worth something?" And there it was. The guilt trip. The emotional manipulation disguised as gratitude. I thought about last Tuesday, when I'd come home from my book club to find my bedroom door open and Karen going through my dresser drawers looking for old photos. I thought about the credit card statement I'd found last month with charges I didn't make. Karen had taken my card just for emergencies and forgotten to mention the $600 in Target purchases. I thought about how I'd stopped inviting friends over because I was embarrassed by the state of my own home. How I'd moved my life into the downstairs suite, a bedroom, bathroom, and sitting area that used to be David's home office because the kids need more space upstairs. I was living like a tenant in the house I owned. "Karen," I said softly, "when you moved in, you promised 6 months. Things changed." Her voice rose defensively. "We had another baby. The economy got bad. Michael's been looking for better opportunities." "For 13 years? Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You know what? We don't have to justify ourselves to you. We're family. Family helps each other. Maybe if you were more supportive, instead of keeping score like some kind of landlord." "I am the landlord," I interrupted, and my own voice surprised me with its firmness. "This is my house, my name on the deed, my mortgage, my late husband's and my life savings that paid for it." Karen's eyes filled with tears, her secret weapon since childhood. "I can't believe you're being like this. We just wanted to feel secure. Like this is our home too. Is that really so terrible?" I watched a tear roll down her cheek and felt the familiar tug of maternal guilt trying to pull me back, trying to make me apologize for having boundaries, for daring to protect what was mine. But something had changed in the moment she'd asked for the deed. Something had crystallized with perfect, painful clarity. They didn't see me as a mother who'd sacrificed for them. They saw me as an obstacle to what they felt entitled to own. "I need to think about this," I said finally, standing up and carrying my coffee cup to the sink. "Think about it?" Michael's voice dripped with disbelief. "What's there to think about? Either you trust your own daughter or you don't." I turned around slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time in the conversation. "You're absolutely right, Michael. That's exactly what I need to think about." I left them in the kitchen and climbed the stairs to my downstairs suite, the small corner of this house that was still mine. Behind me, I heard Karen's voice rise in frustration. Michael's responding in agreement, both of them dissecting my selfishness, my lack of family values, my failure to understand how the world worked now. I closed the door and sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed David and I had shared for 38 years before cancer took him. The same bed where he'd held my hand the night before he died and made me promise I wouldn't spend my life alone, that I'd keep living, keep finding joy. "I'm sorry, David," I whispered to the empty room. "I don't think this is what you meant." Outside my window, Karen's youngest was shrieking with laughter while one of the dogs barked frantically. The sound that used to make me smile now felt like nails on glass. I pulled open my nightstand drawer and found my bank statement, the one I'd been avoiding looking at for weeks. page after page of automatic payments, overdraft fees, and a savings account that had dwindled from $60,000 to barely $8,000 in 5 years. 13 years of good intentions. 13 years of saying yes when I should have said no. 13 years of believing that if I just gave enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, my daughter would remember that I was her mother, not her ATM machine. I folded the statement carefully and put it back in the drawer. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my laptop and began researching real estate agents in my area. It was time to remember something Karen had forgotten. This was my house, my life, my choice. And I was done apologizing for wanting them back. The first crack appeared so small I almost didn't notice it. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Karen had said, standing in my doorway with an apologetic smile. "Michael's paycheck got delayed. Could you cover utilities just this month? We'll pay you back on the 15th. The 15th came and went. When I gently reminded her, she looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Mom, seriously? You're going to nickel and dime us? We're family." That word family became the shield they held up every time a promise broke. 6 months turned into a year. Karen's pregnancy became a beautiful baby girl they named Sophie. I held her in the hospital and felt my resistance melt away. How could I ask them to leave when this precious child needed stability? "Just until Sophie's walking," Karen assured me. "Then we'll have enough saved." But Sophie's first birthday came, and instead of moving out, they brought home a golden retriever puppy. I came home from grocery shopping to find Michael in the backyard, watching the puppy tumble through the grass while Sophie squealed with delight. My stomach dropped. "Michael, we agreed no pets, my allergies." "It's for Sophie," he interrupted, not looking at me. "Kids need to grow up with dogs. It teaches responsibility. Besides, it's a big house. You've got plenty of room." I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind him this wasn't his house, his decision, his right. But Sophie was giggling, her tiny hands buried in golden fur, and Karen appeared at the back door with that pleading look that said, "Please don't ruin this for us." So I swallowed my objections and bought antihistamines. The puppy became 2 dogs when they rescued a beagle mix that needed a home. Then 3, when Karen's friend couldn't keep her collie and it would only be temporary. Nothing was ever temporary. David's study, the room where he'd spent 30 years grading papers and writing lesson plans, became a playroom. His mahogany desk, the one his father had given him, got shoved into the garage to make room for a plastic kitchen set and toy bins that overflowed with plastic junk. "The kids need space to play," Karen explained when I stared at the transformation. "You weren't using it anyway, right?" I wasn't using it because every time I walked in there, I could still smell his cologne, still hear the scratch of his pen on paper. I'd been preserving it. They saw it as wasted space. By year 3, Karen was pregnant again. By year 4, my living room had become unrecognizable. The cream-colored couch David and I had saved for gone, replaced by a sectional that fit the family better. My wedding china, displayed in the cabinet my grandmother left me, packed away because it makes us nervous with the kids running around. Michael's comments grew sharper as the years passed. "You know, modern parents support their adult children," he'd say, scrolling through his phone at dinner. "It's actually economically smarter to live multi-generationally. You should read the studies." When I suggested they might start saving for their own place, he'd look at me like I'd suggested something obscene. "In this economy? Mrs. Jackson, do you know what rent costs now? We'd need both salaries, which means daycare, which costs more than Karen makes. We're being financially responsible by staying." The tightening came gradually, like a python's coil, each squeeze barely noticeable until suddenly I couldn't breathe. "Mom, would you mind moving downstairs?" Karen asked one evening when their second child, Mason, turned 2. "The kids are getting older. They need their own rooms, and you don't use all that space anyway." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my daughter's face. "That's my bedroom, Karen. Your father and I slept there for 38 years. "I know." Her voice softened with practiced sympathy. "But Dad's gone, Mom. You're just one person now. Wouldn't it be nice to have everything on one floor? No stairs? The downstairs suite is actually perfect for you." So I moved. I packed up 38 years of marriage into boxes and carried them downstairs to what used to be David's office. I gave them the master bedroom with the garden view, the walk-in closet, the bathroom with the clawfoot tub David and I had installed on our 20th anniversary. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was helping. I told myself so many lies. That night, lying in my new bedroom, smaller, darker, facing the side yard instead of the garden, I heard laughter floating down from upstairs. Karen and Michael, the kids finally asleep, enjoying wine on what used to be my balcony. They sounded so happy, so comfortable, so completely at home. And I realized with crushing clarity that I wasn't part of that laughter. I was underneath it, supporting it, funding it, but not included in it. I pulled the covers up to my chin and stared at the ceiling, listening to my own house live above me, and felt lonelier than I'd ever felt in the 2 years after David died. At least then, the silence had been mine. The first envelope arrived on a Tuesday, stark white with red letters screaming "Final Notice" across the front. I stared at it over my morning coffee, my hands trembling slightly as I tore it open. The electric company, 3 months overdue, late fees stacking up like dominoes. The total made my stomach drop. $847. Karen had insisted on handling the utility bills 6 months ago. "Let us take care of something, Mom. You do so much already. We'll set up autopay, you won't have to think about it." I found her in the kitchen, packing Sophie's lunch for preschool. The morning chaos swirled around her, cartoons blaring, dogs barking to go out, Mason dumping cereal on the floor. "Karen, I got a notice from the electric company." She barely glanced up. "Oh, that? It's a bank error. I paid it last week. You know how slow these systems are to update. It says 3 months overdue." "Mom." She sighed, that particular sigh that made me feel like a confused child. I said I handled it. "Can we not do this right now? I'm already running late." Michael appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand. "What's the problem?" "There's no problem," Karen said quickly. "Just the electric company being incompetent. Their billing system is a nightmare." "You know how these companies are, Mrs. Jackson." Michael's tone was sympathetic, almost condescending. "They send threatening letters, even when you're enrolled in autopay. It's all automated. Probably some computer glitch." I wanted to believe them. God, how I wanted to believe them. But the notices kept coming. Water bill, gas bill, internet. Each one marked urgent, each one demanding payment I thought had already been made. I started opening my own mail secretly, hiding the envelopes in my nightstand drawer like evidence of a crime I was ashamed to report. 3 months later, I finally worked up the courage to check my bank account online, something I'd avoided since Karen had offered to help manage household finances. The number on the screen didn't make sense at first. I refreshed the page, certain there was an error. My savings account, the one that had held $43,000 from David's life insurance and our retirement, showed $8,234. I scrolled through months of transactions, my vision blurring as the pattern emerged. Automatic withdrawals to cover bills Karen swore she'd paid, overdraft fees, more overdraft fees. Late payment penalties that compounded like interest on a loan I never took out. $11,000 in unpaid household bills, all in my name, all destroying the credit David and I had spent 40 years building. I sat at my small desk in my small room and felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart breaking, but something harder. Something that had been holding me upright. That evening, I set the dinner table with quiet precision. Karen had made spaghetti one of the few meals she still occasionally cooked. The kids ate messily, sauce on their faces, while the dogs circled beneath the table hoping for dropped meatballs. "I need to talk to you both about the bills," I said, my voice calm despite the tremor underneath. Karen's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Mom, not at dinner." $11,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. That's how much is overdue. In my name, destroying my credit. Michael's jaw tightened. "That's not accurate. We've been making payments." "No, you haven't." I pulled out the statements I'd printed, arranged them on the table like cards in a losing hand. "These are from my bank. Every utility, every bill, I've been covering them, all while you told me you were handling it." "This is unbelievable." Karen's eyes filled with tears right on cue. "You're actually sitting here keeping score, tracking every penny like we're strangers instead of your family?" "I'm asking for accountability." "You're making us feel like freeloaders," her voice cracked with practiced hurt. Do you know how hard it is living here, always feeling like we owe you something? Always walking on eggshells?" Sophie started crying, picking up on her mother's distress. Mason's bottom lip quivered. Michael stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You know what? We don't need this. We're doing our best in an impossible situation, and all you can do is complain about money. Maybe you should ask yourself why your own daughter doesn't feel safe being honest with you." He left the kitchen, footsteps heavy on the stairs. Karen gathered the children, shooting me a look that mixed disappointment with something that looked almost like triumph. "I hope you're happy," she whispered, and followed her husband upstairs. I sat alone at the table, surrounded by cooling spaghetti and printed statements that proved I was right and meant absolutely nothing. Later, lying in my downstairs bedroom, I heard their muffled voices above me. Not arguing, no, they were unified now. Unified against me, the unreasonable mother, the selfish grandmother, the woman who chose money over family. David's voice came to me from memory, clear as if he were lying beside me. "Boundaries protect love, Chris. Without them, love becomes obligation, and obligation becomes resentment." He'd said that about his own mother, who'd let his brother live off her for years until there was nothing left but bitterness. I'd nodded, agreed, promised I'd never let anyone take advantage of me that way. "I should have listened," I whispered to the darkness, to the ghost of the man who'd known me better than I knew myself. "David, I should have listened." Above me, the laughter started again, lighter this time, relieved. They'd won this round, and we all knew it. 3 weeks passed in careful silence. We moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the choreography, polite, distant, never quite making eye contact. I went back to my routines. Tuesday morning watering, the way I had for 40 years. David had planted most of these, the fiddle-leaf fig by the window, the pothos trailing from the bookshelf, the African violets that bloomed purple every spring if you talked to them gently. I was misting the fern when Karen walked in, Michael trailing behind her. Something in their posture made my hand freeze mid-spray. "Mom, we need to talk." Karen sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen table with the confidence of someone who owned the chair. I set down the spray bottle carefully. "All right. We've been thinking." She glanced at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. "We've been paying the mortgage now for almost a year." "You've missed 4 payments," I said quietly. She waved her hand like swatting away a fly. "We've been handling the mortgage, contributing, and honestly, it doesn't make sense that our names aren't on the deed." The words took a moment to land, like I was hearing them from underwater. "You want your names on the deed?" "Well, yeah." Karen leaned forward, earnest now. "Think about it, Mom. We're basically co-owners already. We live here. We maintain the property. We're raising our family here. The paperwork should reflect reality." Michael jumped in, his tone reasonable, practiced. "There are significant tax advantages, Mrs. Jackson. Credits for primary residence, property tax deductions we could all benefit from. It's actually the smart financial move." I stared at them, at my daughter's expectant face, at my son-in-law's barely concealed impatience, at the audacity blooming between them like mold. "You've missed 4 mortgage payments in 6 months," I said slowly, making sure each word was clear. "I've covered every single one to protect my credit. The credit you already destroyed with $11,000 in unpaid bills." Karen's expression flickered annoyance, maybe, or embarrassment quickly buried. "See, this is exactly what we're talking about. You're still keeping score. Still making us feel like we're children instead of partners in this household." "Partners?" The word came out sharper than I intended. Partners contribute equally. Partners communicate. Partners don't lie about paying bills and then demand ownership of assets they've never paid for. Michael's reasonable mask slipped. "That's not fair. We've contributed in other ways. Childcare alone, if you had to pay for what Karen does." "Karen is raising her own children, in my house. That I paid for." "Our house," Karen corrected, and something in her tone made my blood run cold. "Mom, whether you want to admit it or not, this is our home too. We've lived here 13 years. That has to count for something. It counts for 13 years of generosity you've mistaken for weakness." The words escaped before I could stop them, true and sharp as broken glass. Michael stood up, his chair scraping violently. "You know what? That's family for you. You help them out, sacrifice for them, and they throw it in your face. Maybe we should have known better than to rely on someone so focused on property and ownership instead of love. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Almost. Let me understand this clearly, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You want me to add your names to the deed of the house my late husband and I worked 40 years to pay for? The house where you've lived rent-free for 13 years. The house whose bills you've failed to pay, whose mortgage you've repeatedly missed. You want ownership, tax credits, and legal claim to an asset you've contributed nothing toward. Is that correct? Karen's eyes filled with tears, but this time, I saw the calculation behind them, the practiced hurt, the weapon she'd been wielding against me for years. I can't believe you see it that way, she whispered. After everything we've been through, after losing Dad together, I thought we were family. We are family, Karen. But this house isn't. The silence that followed felt alive, breathing, poisonous. Michael grabbed his phone from the table. Fine, we'll figure it out ourselves, but don't be surprised when we start looking at our options, legal options. He left. Karen followed, pausing at the doorway to look back at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not sadness, not hurt, but cold assessment. Like she was calculating my worth and finding it wanting. When I was alone again, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by plants I'd kept alive for decades. Plants that needed consistent care, proper boundaries, the right amount of light and water and space to grow. Too much water drowns the roots. Too much shade stunts the growth. Too much accommodation kills what you're trying to save. I picked up my phone and scrolled to the real estate agent's number I'd saved 3 weeks ago but hadn't yet called. My finger hovered over the dial button. Then I thought about Karen's face. Michael's smirk. The casual way they demanded ownership of my life's work. The absolute certainty that I would give in, the way I always had. I pressed dial. Hello. This is Kristen Jackson. I'd like to discuss listing my property. The words felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and liberating and absolutely necessary. I would never add their names to the deed, but more than that I realized with sudden, crystalline clarity I would never give them the chance to ask again. I made a mistake. After the deed conversation exploded, I tried a different approach. Logic, responsibility, consequences that might finally teach them what 13 years of enabling hadn't. If you want equity in this house, I told them over coffee one Sunday morning, you need to prove you can handle the financial responsibility. Starting now, the mortgage payments are entirely yours. Show me 6 months of consistent payments and we'll talk. Karen's face lit up like I'd given her a gift. Really? Mom, thank you. You won't regret this. Michael nodded, suddenly interested. We can handle it. You'll see. I wanted to believe them. Some desperate, foolish part of me still wanted to believe that responsibility would transform them, that ownership would breed respect. 3 months later, I got the first notice. The mortgage company's letter was polite but firm. Payment 30 days overdue. I called Karen immediately. Oh God, Mom, I'm sorry. Michael was supposed to handle it. There was a mix-up with his direct deposit. We'll pay double next month. They didn't. The second missed payment came with a phone call. I was in my downstairs kitchenette, trying to make tea, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my bank's name. Mrs. Jackson, this is Derek from Chase Mortgage Services. I'm calling about your delinquent account. Above me, Sophie and Mason were playing some game that involved shrieking and thundering footsteps. One of the dogs, the beagle, started howling. Another crashed into something that sounded expensive. I'm sorry, I said, pressing the phone harder against my ear. Could you repeat that? Your account is now 60 days past due. We've attempted to contact you multiple times. Mason, no, put that down. Karen's voice pierced through the ceiling, followed by a crash and a child's wail. Mrs. Jackson, are you there? Yes, I'm here. My hand was shaking. I thought my daughter was handling the payments. A pause. Professional sympathy. I understand, ma'am, but the account is in your name. You're legally responsible. If we don't receive payment within 15 days, we'll begin foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. On the house David and I had paid on faithfully for 40 years. The house we'd sacrificed for, the house that held every memory of our marriage, every Christmas morning, every anniversary dinner, every quiet evening reading by the fireplace. I'll take care of it, I whispered. Upstairs, someone turned on music, loud, cheerful pop music that vibrated through the floorboards. I paid the mortgage that afternoon, and the next month's, and the one after that. Karen's apologies became routine, meaningless as white noise. "Mom, we're so sorry. Things have been tight. Michael's boss is being difficult about overtime. The kids needed new shoes. The car needed repairs." Always an excuse. Never accountability. 4 months after I'd handed them responsibility, I sat down at my laptop late one night when the house finally quieted. I navigated to the credit monitoring site I'd been avoiding and typed in my password with numb fingers. The number appeared, 580. I stared at it, trying to remember what it had been before. Before Karen and Michael, before I'd become a co-signer on my own life. It had been 795. Excellent credit. 4 decades of careful financial management. David and I had been so proud. I clicked through the report, watching the carnage unfold in neat, bureaucratic rows. Mortgage, 90 days late. Paid by account holder, electric. Sent to collections, $847. Water, 120 days delinquent. Paid by account holder. Credit card joint, added Karen. Maxed, minimum payments only medical bills, co-signed for Karen. $2,300. Collections, store cards, authorized user Karen. Multiple missed payments. Each line was a small death, each notation a theft of futures. I'd planned the trip to Italy, I'd promised David we'd take someday. The new roof I'd been saving for. The retirement that was supposed to be restful, peaceful, mine. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window beside my desk. I looked older than 67, tired, worn down like stone under water. But something else looked back too. Something I hadn't seen in years. Clarity. This wasn't teaching them responsibility. This wasn't helping them grow. This was financing my own diminishment, funding my own erasure, paying for the privilege of being taken advantage of. I had been afraid of being the bad mother, the selfish grandmother, the ungenerous woman who chose money over family. I'd been so afraid of my own boundaries that I'd let them destroy everything David and I built. The house was quiet now. Finally. Just me and my wrecked credit report, and the truth I'd been running from for 13 years. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, feeling something shift deep inside my chest, not breaking, crystallizing, hardening into resolve. "I'm done," I whispered to the empty room, to my reflection, to the ghost of the man who would have stopped this years ago. "I'm done being afraid of my own kindness." The words hung in the air like a vow, like a promise I was finally ready to keep. I couldn't sleep that night, not from anxiety, but from a strange electric alertness, like my body knew something my mind was still catching up to. At 2 a.m, I gave up on rest and slipped out of my downstairs bedroom. The house was finally silent. Even the dogs had stopped their restless pacing. I walked through my home the way you walk through a museum of your own life. In the living room, I ran my hand along the wall where David had hung our wedding photo. It was gone now, replaced by a canvas print of Karen's family professional portraits with forced smiles and matching outfits. Our history, painted over. I touched the mantel where we'd displayed our travel souvenirs. They'd been packed away to make room for children's artwork and participation trophies. 40 years of memories, boxed and forgotten in the garage. The kitchen still held the ghost of 1,000 meals. David making Sunday pancakes, Flower dusting his reading glasses, Karen as a little girl, standing on a stool to help stir brownie batter. Holiday dinners when the table couldn't hold all the food and laughter spilled into every corner. But now? Now it smelled like stale dog food and someone else's cooking. The counters were cluttered with mail I wasn't allowed to touch. Appointment cards for children who weren't mine. Reminders for a life I was funding but not living. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step a small rebellion. These stairs I'd been avoiding, surrendering the upper floor like surrendering territory in a war I didn't realize I was losing. The master bedroom door was closed. Behind it, Karen and Michael slept in the bed David died in, though I'd never told them that. They'd redecorated, of course. New paint, new curtains, new everything. You couldn't tell an old man had taken his last breath there while holding his wife's hand. I pressed my palm against the door and felt nothing. No anger, no grief, just a hollow acknowledgement that this space wasn't mine anymore. Maybe it never would be again. Sophie's room, my old sewing room, still had the window seat David built when Karen was 10. She'd spent hours there, reading books and watching birds. Now it was buried under stuffed animals and dress-up clothes. I stood in the doorway and remembered teaching Karen to sew in this room, her small hands guiding fabric under the needle, tongue poking out in concentration. "Like this, Mom?" she'd ask, and I'd kiss the top of her head and tell her she was doing perfectly. When had perfect stopped being enough? When had everything I gave become simply what she expected? I made my way back downstairs as the first light started bleeding through the windows. That strange hour when night hasn't quite released its grip, but morning is already reaching up. I made coffee the good kind I kept hidden in the back of my cupboard because it was too expensive for every day. Screw that. This felt like a day for the good coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Karen had demanded the deed. The same table where every boundary I'd tried to set had been negotiated away. The same table where I'd been made to feel selfish for wanting my own life back. The coffee was hot and perfect, and mine. Something crystallized in that moment, clear as the morning light strengthening outside. This house, this beautiful, suffocating house, was killing me by inches. Not dramatically, not violently, but through slow erosion, like water wearing away stone until one day you realize there's nothing left but hollow space where something solid used to be. I didn't want to be hollow anymore. I pulled out my phone and found the real estate agent's number, the one I'd called weeks ago and then apologized to, saying I'd made a mistake. I wasn't ready. I'd been emotional. But I hadn't been emotional. I'd been clear. And then I'd let fear talk me back into my cage. This time, I typed out a message before I could second guess. "This is Kristen Jackson. I'm ready to list the property. Can we meet this week to discuss?" I hit send before the doubt could creep in. The sun was rising now, painting the kitchen in shades of gold and pink, the same kitchen where I'd packed Karen's school lunches for 12 years. Where David had proposed to me 45 years ago, too nervous to wait for a fancy restaurant. Where we'd celebrated every anniversary, every promotion, every small victory of a life built together. But David was gone. And the life we'd built had become a prison of my own construction. I sipped my coffee and watched the day begin, not with dread, but with something that felt dangerously close to hope. "It's time to live my life," I whispered to the empty kitchen, to the morning, to the woman in the window's reflection who finally looked like someone I recognized. The house creaked and settled around me, and for the first time in 13 years, I didn't feel like an intruder in my own home. I felt like someone preparing to leave. I made pancakes that morning, not because it was a special occasion, but because I wanted to. David's recipe, the one with buttermilk and a pinch of cinnamon. The kitchen filled with the smell of butter and vanilla, warm and comfortable in mine. Karen came down first, still in her pajamas, drawn by the scent. "Pancakes? What's the occasion?" "No occasion." I flipped one perfectly, golden brown. Just felt like making breakfast. Michael appeared next, followed by the chaos of children and dogs. Sophie climbed into her chair, Mason demanded chocolate chips, and for a moment, it almost felt normal, almost felt like family. I served everyone, poured coffee, and sat down at my usual spot. My hands were steady, my heartbeat was calm. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times over the past 3 days, but now that it was here, the words came easily. "I need to tell you something." I set down my fork. "I'm selling the house." Karen laughed. Actually laughed, like I'd told a joke. "Good one, Mom. Pass the syrup?" "I'm not joking. The realtor is coming tomorrow for the walkthrough. We're listing it next week." The laughter died. Karen's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, then something harder. "You're not serious." "I am." Michael's fork clattered against his plate. "Mrs. Jackson, if this is about the mortgage payments—" "It's about everything," I said calmly. "It's about 13 years of broken promises. It's about $11,000 in unpaid bills. It's about my destroyed credit, my drained savings, and my life being lived in a corner of my own home." "So you're just going to sell it?" Karen's voice rose, shrill with panic. "Just like that? Without even discussing it with us?" I don't need to discuss my house with you, Karen. It's my name on the deed, my decision to make. What about us? She gestured wildly at her children, at Michael. Where are we supposed to go? You're just kicking us out? Kicking out your own grandchildren? Sophie started crying, sensing the tension. Mason's bottom lip quivered. I felt the familiar stab of guilt, the maternal instinct to soothe, to apologize, to take it all back. But I didn't. You've had 13 years to prepare, I said quietly. 13 years to save, to plan, to find your own place. I've given you time, I've given you money. I've given you everything, and it's never been enough. Michael stood abruptly, his chair scraping violently. This is unbelievable. After everything we've done for you, we've kept you company, we've given you a family to care for. You would have been alone in this big house, rattling around like some bitter old woman. Instead, I became a bitter old woman funding your life while you destroyed mine. The words came out harder than I intended, but they were true. We all knew they were true. We've earned part of this house, Michael continued, his face reddening. Sweat equity. 13 years of living here, maintaining it, improving it. You painted walls without asking. You broke agreements. You turned my home into something I don't recognize. My voice remained steady. That's not improvement, Michael. That's invasion. Karen's tears started, real ones this time. Not the practiced manipulation, but genuine shock and fury. I can't believe you. After Dad died, we stayed for you. We gave up our independence to make sure you wouldn't be alone. And this is how you repay us? You stayed because Michael lost his job and you had nowhere else to go. Don't rewrite history to make yourself the hero. We're family, Karen's voice cracked. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means everything to me. That's why this has been so hard. I stood, meeting her eyes. But I'm not your landlord, Karen. I'm not your bank. I'm your mother, and this is my home, and I'm taking it back. From your own daughter. Her voice dripped with venom now. From your grandchildren. What kind of person does that? The kind who wants to live the last years of her life in peace. Michael grabbed his keys from the counter. Fine. You want us gone? We're gone. But don't expect us to come running back when you're old and sick and need someone to take care of you. Don't expect those grandkids to even remember your name. The threat hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Karen gathered Sophie into her arms, mascara running down her cheeks. I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope this house is worth it. Because you're going to die alone in it. And nobody's going to care. She stormed out, Michael following, their footsteps thundering up the stairs to pack an overnight bag, a dramatic exit, a punishment. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by half-eaten pancakes and syrup spreading across the tablecloth. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up. You're going to die alone. The words found their mark, burrowing deep where the fear lived. The primal terror of abandonment, of ending up like those news stories, elderly person found weeks after death, no one even noticing they were gone. But I'd already been alone. For 13 years, I'd been alone in a house full of people who saw me as a resource, not a person. At least now, the loneliness would be honest. I heard them leave car doors slamming, engine roaring to life, gravel crunching as they peeled out of the driveway. The house settled into silence. Real silence, not the tense quiet of resentment. I sat back down at the table and finished my pancakes. They were cold now, but they tasted like freedom. And freedom, I was learning, didn't require anyone's approval but my own. They came back 3 days later with a U-Haul and Michael's brother. I heard them before I saw them, the trucks beeping as it backed into the driveway, car doors slamming with more force than necessary, footsteps that announced anger with every step. Karen didn't knock. She still had her key, and she used it like a statement. The front door swung open and hit the wall, and suddenly my quiet house filled with noise again, children crying, dogs barking, Michael's voice barking orders. I stayed in the kitchen, hands wrapped around my coffee mug, and waited. She appeared in the doorway, her face carefully blank. No tears today, just cold efficiency. We'll be out by tonight, she said, not quite looking at me. All right. I assume you'll want your keys back. Yes, please. The formality between us was like a wall made of ice, solid, transparent, impossible to break through without shattering everything. The next 4 hours passed in a strange ballet of avoidance. They moved through the house, taking what was theirs, and I stayed out of their way. The sound of packing tape screaming off the roll. Boxes being dragged across hardwood floors. Michael's muttered commentary about family loyalty and what we sacrificed, just loud enough for me to hear but not loud enough to require response. I found myself in Sophie's room, the room that had been my sewing space, watching Karen strip the bed, the princess sheets, the stuffed animals arranged just so on the window seat. "Can I help?" I asked quietly. Karen's hands stilled on the pillowcase. For a moment, I thought she might soften, might let me in one last time. "We don't need your help." Her voice was flat, carefully controlled. "We've been doing everything ourselves for years anyway, right?" The words landed like they were meant to sharp, accusatory, final. But I noticed her hands trembling as she stuffed the sheets into a trash bag. Noticed the way she turned away when Sophie asked, "Grandma, are you coming with us?" "No, baby," Karen answered before I could. "Grandma wants to live alone now." I knelt beside my granddaughter, these children I'd watched grow, whose artwork covered my refrigerator, whose laughter had filled my home. "I love you both very much," I said to Sophie, then to Mason hovering in the doorway. "That will never change." Sophie's bottom lip quivered. "Did we do something bad?" "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong." I pulled her into a hug, breathing in her strawberry shampoo, memorizing the feel of her small arms around my neck. Sometimes grown-ups need to make hard choices. But Grandma loves you. Always. Karen pulled Sophie away gently, but firmly. "Come on, honey, we need to finish packing." By late afternoon, the house looked like it had been ransacked, empty spaces where furniture had stood, lighter rectangles on the walls where pictures had hung. The living room carpet still showed the indentations from their sectional couch, ghost furniture marking what used to be. I helped carry boxes of toys to the truck, small acts of service, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands, with the grief that felt different than sadness. Not mourning what was, but what could have been if things had been different, if boundaries had been respected, if love hadn't become obligation. Michael loaded the last box and slammed the truck door. He walked past me without a word, got in the driver's seat, and started the engine. Karen stood by the passenger door, keys in her hand. For a moment, just a moment, our eyes met. I saw anger there, yes, betrayal. But underneath, buried deep, I saw something that looked like relief, like maybe she'd been tired too. Like maybe we'd both been trapped in a dynamic neither of us knew how to escape. Karen. "Goodbye, Mom." She dropped the keys on the porch railing. The small clink of metal on wood sounded like a door closing. "I hope you get what you wanted." She got in the car without looking back. The U-Haul pulled away first, followed by their sedan. I watched from the porch as they turned onto the street and disappeared. No honking, no waving, no final glance in the rearview mirror. Just gone. I stood there for a long time, holding the keys they'd left behind, feeling the late afternoon sun warm on my face. A neighbor walked by with a dog, waved. I waved back, this ordinary gesture in an extraordinary moment. Then I walked back inside and closed the door behind me. The silence was absolute. No television, no children's voices, no dogs barking, no footsteps overhead. Just the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the grandfather clock David's parents had given us. I stood in the center of the living room, in the space where their couch had been, where sunlight streamed through the windows and painted golden rectangles across the floor. The house felt bigger somehow, emptier, yes, but also fuller, like it could breathe again. "My house again," I whispered, and my voice trembled not with sadness, but with relief so profound it felt like coming up for air after being underwater too long. I walked through each room slowly, touching walls, opening windows, letting fresh air in. In the master bedroom, I stood in the doorway and imagined moving back in, reclaiming the space where David and I had built our life. 3 days later, I met the realtor at her office. The buyers, a young couple expecting their first child, had made a generous offer. Cash sale, quick closing. I signed the papers with a steady hand, my signature neat and sure across line after line. The realtor explained each document, but I barely heard her. I was thinking about coastal towns and quiet mornings and a life that belonged only to me. The check was deposited that afternoon. I watched the number appear in my account, enough to pay off every debt Karen and Michael had created, repair my credit, and start over somewhere new. My future, I realized, sitting in the bank parking lot staring at my phone screen, finally belonged to me alone. And for the first time in 13 years, that didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom. The sunrise in Charleston is different than it was up north. Softer, somehow. The light comes in shades of peach and lavender instead of harsh gold, and it moves across the water like a gentle hand smoothing wrinkled fabric. I sit on my porch, on my cottage, in my quiet coastal town, and watch the day begin with a peace I'd forgotten existed. It's been 3 months since the move. 3 months since I drove south with everything that mattered, packed into a modest U-Haul, leaving behind the house that had held 45 years of my life but had stopped feeling like home. The cottage is small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with windows that overlook a garden I'm slowly bringing back to life, and a porch that wraps around the front like an embrace. No room for anyone but me. No space for obligations I don't choose. Perfect. I sip my coffee, the good kind, always the good kind now, and listen to the morning. The distant shush of waves, a neighbor's wind chimes singing in the breeze, birds whose names I'm still learning. The absence of chaos is its own kind of music. My phone buzzes. A text from Diane, my old neighbor from up north. We'd been friends for 20 years, sharing garden advice and book recommendations over the fence. Heard from the grapevine that Karen and Michael moved in with his parents. Apparently things got rough after you left. Hope you're doing well. Miss you. I read it twice, waiting for the guilt to arrive. The maternal instinct to worry, to rescue, to fix. It doesn't come. Instead, I feel something gentler. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance. Karen and Michael are living the same pattern with new hosts, learning or not learning the same lessons. Entitlement, I've discovered, always costs more than rent ever could. I type back, I'm doing well. Really well. Give my love to the neighborhood. And I mean it. I am well. Better than I've been in over a decade. My credit score is climbing back 698 last I checked, up from the wreckage they left behind. My savings account is rebuilding, modest but mine. The life insurance money David left me, what little remained, is now earning interest instead of funding someone else's choices. But more than the numbers, it's the feeling, the expansion in my chest when I wake up each morning, the ability to breathe fully without waiting for the other shoe to drop, the next crisis, the next demand disguised as family loyalty. I've made friends here, real ones. Susan from the bookstore who recommends mysteries and invites me to her Tuesday night book club. Robert from 3 houses down who brings me tomatoes from his garden and asks nothing in return. The couple next door who wave from their morning walks and respect the beautiful boundary of friendly distance. Community without suffocation. Connection without obligation. Love that doesn't require self-erasure. I think about Karen sometimes. Wonder if she's happy, if she's learned anything, if she ever thinks about the mother who loved her enough to finally say no. I hope she does. I hope she finds her own version of this peace, whatever that looks like. But hoping for her happiness no longer requires sacrificing my own. The sun is fully up now, turning the ocean into a sheet of hammered gold. I stand and stretch, feeling the pleasant ache of a body that's 67 years old and finally being treated with respect. Early nights, morning walks, meals eaten slowly without chaos spinning around me. After 40 years of noise, I say aloud to the morning, to the ocean, to the ghost of David who I sometimes feel sitting beside me in moments like this, I've finally earned my silence. The words float out over the garden. I'm planting herbs and flowers, nothing that requires too much maintenance, everything chosen because it brings me joy. Tomorrow I'll add the rosemary David always loved. A small memorial to the man who taught me what partnership should look like, even if it took me years after his death to remember the lesson. A pelican glides past, impossibly graceful against the pink sky. The world is waking up, and I'm awake with it, not dreading the day ahead, but curious about it. Open to it, present in it. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm not living in survival mode, not counting pennies someone else is spending, not measuring my words to avoid triggering an argument, not shrinking myself to make room for people who never saw me clearly anyway. I'm just living, fully inhabiting my own life, in my own space, on my own terms. The phone buzzes again. A reminder about my pottery class this afternoon, something I signed up for on a whim, because I could, because the money and time were mine to spend. I smile and finish my coffee, savoring the last sip. The house behind me is quiet. The day ahead is mine. The life I'm building belongs to no one but me. And standing here on this porch, watching the world come alive in shades of gold and blue, I realize something profound. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm home. Finally, blessedly, completely, I'm home. Thank you for watching to the very end. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because the next story isn't just intriguing, it's unforgettable. You'll be talking about it all week.